All right, welcome back. So I've done some things off screen because we've already covered this in past tutorials. Basically, what I did is on my character that I've got set in the scene, I've created a capsule collider. I've also created a Nav Mesh Agent and put both of those on there. Remember to, on your capsule collider, make sure that you kind of move the center up and change the height so that it fits pretty well. The Nav Mesh Agent, I'm just using the default settings because all I really need to do is make sure that that Nav Mesh setting, don't get confused here, is, let me see, that's the capsule collider. The Nav Mesh Agent is this shape. That shape is just kind of roughly the size of the character, and this just makes sure that the Nav Mesh Agent is able to run around on the Nav Mesh. Now the last thing I did is I created a new script called Wizard AI script. This is literally just the zombie script with a different name. So just as a quick rundown, we're keeping track of the Nav Mesh Agent and the animator. We've created an array of waypoints and a number, an integer called next waypoints. The script is also keeping track of the player so that the AI knows who to chase. And we're keeping track of some ranges, the chase range, the attack range, and escape range. Finally, we've got a Boolean for is patrolling. On awake, we make sure and populate those two buckets. On start, we fire that pick next waypoint first thing and tell it not to update the position using my agent, that instead we're going to be updating the position by the animation speed that's happening there and set it to be patrolling. So then every frame what we're doing is we're checking to see if we're patrolling. If we are, then we check to see if we're still calculating a path. If we're not, and our distance to the wherever its destination is less than 0.5, then it means we've reached that waypoint, so go ahead and pick the next waypoint. If we drop down to pick next waypoint, this is pretty simple stuff. Basically what it does is my agent's destination is set to whatever is in the bucket number, whatever next waypoint is. And then every time we set that new destination, we add one to whatever that next waypoint number is. And then, of course, if we get to the last of the waypoints, then we reset that back to 0. So that's what's happening when we're patrolling. Now, otherwise, what it's doing is every frame it's measuring the distance to the player. Distance to the player is measured using vector3.distance between the position that this script is attached to and the player's position. If the distance to the player is less than the chase range and we're bigger than the attack range, then is patrolling is set to false. We set the destination of our Nav Mesh Agent to be the player, and then we start flipping Booleans. So we change him so that he's running, not walking or attacking. If the distance player is less than attack range, we go ahead and set is patrolling to false. Again, we reset the path to make this to 0. We set running to false, walking to false, and attacking to true. And then, of course, if distance to player is greater than escape range and we're not patrolling, then go ahead and set is patrolling to true, pick the next waypoint, and then go back to walking. Is how that works. Now remember, these are some kind of goofy things, but this becomes an important part of making sure that the Nav Mesh Agent stays close to the animated character. So we want to make sure that that line is in there. We also have this onAnimator move function that basically makes sure that the character stays oriented so that he doesn't start floating away or dropping below the floor. On gizmos selected, our onDraw gizmos, this is a little bit different. I used onDraw gizmos in the last one. The only thing is this time I just used onDraw gizmos selected. The only reason why I did that is that what it means is that if I don't have the character selected, I don't have all the circles. But when I do select the character, when you see that I have non-zero values for my chase, attack, and escape range, then I can see it. It just made it that when I was using onDraw gizmos, then there's just too many circles, and it was kind of too hard to see. So I adjusted that. Let's do one other thing. What I've done here is these are all the waypoints, and of course I don't want to see those waypoints in the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a quick script, quick part of the script to hide those. To do this, we're going to look at a new type of loop. Up until now, we have looked at a couple different types of loops. We've looked at while loops. We've looked at for loops, loops that have this kind of thing in it. Here, let me just paste them in there. That should look kind of familiar. But what we want to do now is look at a new kind of loop called a for each loop. For each loops are kind of interesting, real powerful. What they do is they can go through particularly arrays, and for each of the parts of that array, it can do something. So for instance, right now we have an array called waypoints. So what I can do is say for each transform that we're going to call WP, for each WP inside the array that is called waypoints, then I want you to do some work. So literally what we're doing is we're making a bucket called WP, and in each one, and it's going to make a different bucket for each one of the objects that are inside of that array, in this case each of the transforms that are inside of that array, and then iteratively, one after another, to each one of them, it's going to come in and do some work. So I'm going to say, for each of these, go to that, get its game object, get its game object, there, get the component on it called renderer. This is the thing that actually draws it. And let's do enabled set to false. So what it does is it just takes all of the transforms inside of the array waypoints and turns off the renderer. So what will happen now is that if we come back out into Unity, so in Unity I've turned off the lighting with this button right here, and I've also disabled Aura Preview so that I can see what's happening down here. This is what the game still looks like, but I'm interested in what's happening here. If you get some random errors here, just go ahead and clear those. If they don't go away, you got to fix them, but if they do go away, sometimes it's just some goofy stuff that happens with Aura. But what will happen now is that if I hit play, watch my waypoints, my 3 waypoints there, that when I hit play, those 3 waypoints will disappear, even though it's clear that my bad guy still, after he's done with that, still sees them, right? He still knows what his patrol points are, and still goes after those 3 patrol points as he works. All right, so that's kind of the basic idea there. Let's look at the other stuff, make sure that it works. What I've done is I have moved my first-person controller so that he's much closer there. The idea being is that I want to check to see if my so here's my chase distance, here's my getaway distance. I might adjust those, and then you can see that my attack distance is much larger than usual because he doesn't melee attack me. He's going to have a ranged attack. So let's see if that part works. So we'll go ahead and hit play here. What he should do is he'll run through his idle, and then he'll start walking towards these because he's patrolling. So he's doing his patrol. He's doing his patrol. Now, meanwhile, I'm going to walk over inside of the game, and I'm going to get close enough. You'll see me kind of pop into the screen up there. And once I get close enough there, you see how he swaps to run. And then when I'm inside of the attack, he goes ahead and starts doing the attack. Okay, so I know that all this works. Again, this is all just exactly what we had before in the zombie script. Literally, you could copy and paste it over from the zombie script, or try and write it from scratch, which would be the best way to do it. What we want to do now is build a few other things into this. Number one, I want to make sure that he actually has a ball that he's going to throw. We want to make sure that that ball instantiates when it's time to throw, and we want to make sure that we develop the method so that it actually instantiates that ball that he throws at the appropriate time of the animation. All right, to do this, we're going to create 2 different versions of the ball that he's going to shoot. One that's actually going to sit in his hand that'll be carrying around, and then one that will instantiate when he actually throws the ball. So for now, I mean, we're going to make these beautiful later, but for now I'm going to create a sphere here. The sphere, I'm going to go ahead and scale that down so that it feels a little bit better for his hand. By the way, these yellow lines that you see starting to show up, those what all those are is they're just working with reflection probes and lighting probes, is how those are working. You can turn that off if you want to, so that it's not lit. But there's some kind of sophisticated lighting and reflection baking techniques that are being used here. So let's say that this is what we're going to use. Let's call this magic ball, and I'm going to call this one in hand, so that we've got it set there. Now it's going to be important that this ball, later we're going to put a bunch of effects on it, but for now it's going to be important that this ball actually follows that hand. So what we're going to do is make it a child of one of the joints that are controlling that hand. So if I look at my character, come into the hips, you'll start to look here and you can see the different joints. So there's the spine. I know you haven't taken rigging yet, so a lot of this isn't going to make a lot of sense. But as you start to move, here's his right shoulder, so we'll look at his right shoulder, his right arm, right forearm. Right hand is probably the one that we want to make this a child of. So I'm going to take the magic ball in hand and just make it a child of that right hand right there. So if we were to play this, then you can see that that ball stays stuck to his hand. And then as he's walking around, let's hit Shift F, as he's walking around, then we can see that that magic ball is indeed kind of hanging out there. Okay. Now in a minute, what we want to do is start to make it so that when he decides to throw it, then it looks like he actually throws that ball. So I'm going to take this ball here, I'm going to duplicate it. I'm just going to slide it over here and move it out. So this one I'm going to change the name to Magic Ball Projectile, because this is the one that's actually going to shoot off. I want to make sure it has a mesh collider, and because we're going to be giving it velocity, I want to make sure that it has a rigid body on it. Now that rigid body, you can choose whether it's got gravity or not. I'm probably going to turn gravity off on mine just for now. And then just to make sure I can see these, what I'm going to do is make just a temporary material. I'm probably going to get rid of this later because I don't actually want to see just this ball, but let's call this glowing ball material. And in that glowing ball material, I'm just going to make sure it's emissive and give it some color. So maybe I'm going to give it red. And then make sure, here I'll make this red too, and then make sure that that's attached both to the projectile, and I'm going to make sure it's attached to the magic ball in the hand just so that I can always see it. Okay, so I've got this magic ball projectile. This magic ball projectile has a sphere collider on it. It'll be important because we need to know when it hits us. And number two, we want to make sure it's got a rigid body on it so that we know when, so that we can give it velocity. Now, what I'll do with this magic ball projectile is I'm just going to make that a prefab. I'm going to stick it up into my wizard assets, so I've got it there, and I can get rid of this here. Now, what that will do is that later I can do the old switcheroo thing that we did with the rocket launcher and the skeet shooter, is that when he gets ready to throw this thing, then he can actually throw it, and will instantiate the rigid body version and give it velocity. So the key is we need to make sure that we know exactly when in the animation that we want that thing to happen. Now, to do this, we're going to use a new tool inside of Unity we haven't looked at before called animation events. Animation events are a pretty cool technique. What I'm going to do is come in and grab my attack. So remember, this is the ones that we've set up before. We've got a loop on it. We've renamed it attack. We've made sure that we've baked in the rotation so that right now we see him getting ready to do that throwing. But what we're going to want to have happen is that somewhere about right there, maybe, right, we're going to want to hide this one that's a child of his hand, and instead instantiate the new one with the velocity and let it kind of shoot off. So the first thing we got to do is determine, tell it that right here at this frame is where we want this to happen. So the way that this works is that if you look at the clip, again I'm looking at the clip inside of the inspector, and I scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, you're going to find a drop down menu called Events. Now this is where we'll add the animation event. Now as you start to kind of drag through here, you can see that this slides along as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and decide where it is I'd want that to happen. So maybe, yeah, maybe right there. I like right there. So you can kind of pick wherever the right place is, but I think that's a good place to actually do the switch. What I'll do is two steps. Number one is I'm going to click on this button right here to add an event. Now what that will do is that you'll see a new, if we start to scroll here, there's a new event that's right there. That event right now doesn't have any name, but I'm going to come back to that event, make sure that I select that event, and that event I'm going to change so that it's not called new event, but I'm going to change the function for, let's call it throw ball. Okay. Now this is literally the name of a method that I'm going to call out later. You can see that there's a bunch of other things here. These are actually arguments you can pass to the method, but for us, we don't need any of them. All we just need to do is say, look, whenever you're playing this animation, I wish you could grab that time slider up here, but you can't. You have to grab it down here. That when you are playing this animation, when you hit that event right there, then you're going to fire a method called throw ball. Now this method by default expects to be seen on the object that this animation is at. Luckily, this animation, let's go ahead and apply that. This animation is going to be part of the animator that is already attached to our AI, so we can use our current script, our wizard AI script, to make this happen. So I'm going to come down and just kind of anywhere here, I'm going to make a new method that's going to be public so that other scripts can talk to it called, did we call it throw ball? I think it was called throw ball. Let's go back and check. I can't remember. Let's just make sure so we get this right from the beginning. So we'll come down to the events. Let's look at that event. Yeah, throw ball. Okay. So throw ball is where that's set. So just for now, let's make sure that it works. I'm going to print Shazam so that I know that we're actually getting there before I spend a bunch of time doing the other sorts of things. Okay, so back to Unity here. All right, after it's compiled, then let's see if we can see this Shazam working out. So what will happen is that when we play the game, let's pull back here just a little bit so we can kind of see what happens here. And I start to walk over here and see that glowing red ball. That when he gets ready to start throwing the ball, then he throws it, and if you look over here in my console, you can see Shazam happening at that exact point. Okay, so that's good. That means that our animation event is actually triggering that spot in our script. So here we can do some of the same stuff that we've done before. Again, we're just kind of leveraging stuff we already know. So let's create a let's create a public transform that is the ball launch point. So that's where we know where the ball is going to come from. Let's also make a public rigid body variable that's going to be the magic ball that we're actually gonna fire through. So this launch point is going to be the ball that's in his hand, and this one is going to be the instantiated ball that we get ready to go. And then here we're going to do kind of the same things that we've always looked at before. So let's create a rigid body called cloned magic ball. Let's immediately populate cloned magic ball with, let's see, cloned magic ball with instantiate the, what do we call it, magic ball at wherever our magic ball launch point, what do we call it? Oh, ball launch point. At our ball launch point's position, it's already a transform, position and the magic ball launch point's rotation. Okay, so that's going to instantiate it right there. If I could just spell instantiate right. Instantiate. Okay. And then what I want to do is give it some velocity. Now, the velocity here we want to be a little bit careful of because we don't know if that ball is actually facing forward. We want to actually use the character's forward direction, so we'll want to be kind of careful how we build that. So we'll probably do this a little bit differently in the future, a little bit more sophisticated. But for here, let's just have it be in the forward direction of our bad guy, because he's of course facing forward. So what will come in is we'll tell a cloned magic ball that it's going to have a velocity. Remember, we can just do clone magic ball dot velocity because clone magic ball is a rigid body. Dot velocity that's going to be equal to let's use our own transform direction so that we can convert from local to global. We'll use our own vector 3 dot forward, so we're using our positive z, and let's multiply that by, let's say, 10. We could probably make that a variable to do that. So what this will do is it will instantiate the clone magic ball, and then it will give it some velocity. Okay, so let's come in and tie everything up together. So as we grab hold, as we come back over to our, as this finishes compiling, as we look at this, then this is going to ask for where the launch point is. That will be the magic ball in the hand, right? That will be the one that we want there. And then second of all, it wants to know which magic ball to instantiate. That will be our projectile, so that it's set there. So what should happen now is that when we play the game and we go running up so that it triggers the attack, then we should be able to see the bad guy throwing a ball at us. All right, so that's working. Okay, so if you look in the bottom right, you can see that happening. As you look in the top left, you can see that happening as well. Now, of course, we have that kind of strange thing that he throws the ball, but that ball is still kind of showing up in his hand. So we might have to do some other things. So let's come in and let's make a public. Would have been better if we, well, here we already have that launch point, so we don't need to make a new one there. Let's just come down here, and when we're instantiating that ball, where are we instantiating that ball at? Oh, throw ball. At this point where we're actually instantiating the new ball, let's go ahead and say, hey, ball launch point, get your component that is called renderer, and there I want you to set that enabled to false. Let's see, ball launch point is a transform, so we might have to back out to the game object. Okay, so what that'll do is that'll turn that off. Now we probably need to have a reload, but let's just check to see if that works. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save that. Let's try it here. So let's run over here as he gets ready to throw. Huh. Okay. Then you saw the one that his hand went off, right? And then a new one keeps getting instantiated. And of course, they're just kind of floating around. Okay, so let's build in the reload. So let's create an IEnumerator real quick that we're going to call reload magic ball. Let's yield return new wait for seconds. Let's wait for, I don't know, 1 second might be too long. I could probably go and figure that out from the animation. But then what I'm going to do is turn this ball back on. So let's turn that ball back on. All right, so we'll compile. And let's play. All right, so he needs to be patrolling before we come in there. All right, so he starts patrolling. Should throw that. 1 second's too long, huh? Okay, so let's make oh, and we didn't tell it to actually we never told it to start that coroutine. What a rookie mistake. Reload magic ball. Let's go ahead and do that, and I'm gonna say this is half a second. Okay. All right, so now as we play this, Then when he starts to attack, yep. So now I think 0.5 seconds is too small. Okay, so anyway, now I'm just kind of fooling with stuff. You can adjust this however you want. So maybe I'm doing 1 second to try and track it down. You can kind of play around a little bit with how you want the visuals of that to work, kind of adjusting the timing as you want. But at the end of this tutorial, you should be at a place where your character, where the bad guy actually patrols, that the bad guy chases, and when the bad guy sees you, then the bad guy throws a ball in your direction.